Hello, James, Barnaby and William. I'm going to carry on now with Stig of the Dump. And do you remember last time Barney had fallen into the dump and he'd met Stig, his new friend. And where we left off, Stig was about to show him around his cave, which is at the side of the dump. So I'm going to carry on now. Stig seemed to understand that Barney was approving of his home, and his face lit up. He took on the air of a householder showing a visitor round his property, and began pointing out some of the things he seemed particularly proud of. First, the plumbing. Where the water dripped through a crack in the roof of the cave, he had wedged the mudguard of a bicycle. The water ran along this, through the tube of a vacuum cleaner, and into a big can with writing on it. By the side of this was a plastic football, carefully cut in half, and Stig dipped up some of the water and offered it to Barney. Barney had swallowed a mouthful before he made out the writing on the can. It said, "Weed killer." However, the water only tasted of rust and rubber. It was dark in the back of the cave. Stig went to the front where the ashes of a fire were smoking faintly, blew on them, picked up a book that lay beside his bed, tore out a page and rolled it up, lit it at the fire and carried it to a lamp set in a niche in the wall. As it flared up, Barney could see it was in fact an old teapot, filled with some kind of oil and with a bootlace hanging out of it for a wick. In the light of the lamp, Stig went to the very back of the cave and began to thump the wall and point, and explain something in his strange grunting language. Barney didn't understand a word, but he recognised the tone of voice, like when grown-ups go on about, "I'm thinking of tearing this down and building on here and having this done up." Stig had been digging into the wall, enlarging his cave. There was a bit of an old bed he had been using as a pick, and a baby's bath full of loose chalk to be carried away. Barney made the interested sort of noises you are supposed to make when people tell you they are going to put up plastic wallpaper with pictures of mouse traps on it, but Stig reached up to a bunch of turnips hanging from a poker stuck in the wall. He handed Barney a turnip, took one for himself, and began to eat it. Barney sat down on a bundle of old magazines done up with string and munched the turnip. The turnip at least was fresh, and it tasted better to him than the cream of spinach he'd hidden under his spoon at dinner time. Barney looked at Stig. Funny person to find living next door to you, he thought. Stig didn't seem much bigger than himself, but he looked very strong, and his hands looked cleverer than his face. But how old was he? 10? 20? 100? 1,000? "You been here long?" asked Barney. Stig grinned again. "Long," he said. "Long, long, long." But it sounded more like an echo, or a parrot copying somebody than an answer to his question. "I'm staying at my grandmother's house," said Barney. Stig just looked at him. "Oh well," thought Barney, "if he's not interested in talking, I don't mind." He stood up. "I better go now," he said. "Thank you for having me. Can I have my knife back, please?" Stig still looked blank. "Knife," said Barney, and made cutting movements with his hand. Stig picked up the sharp-worked flint from the floor of the cave and gave it to Barney. "Ooh, can I have that?" exclaimed Barney. "Thank you." He looked at the stone, hard and shiny, almost like a diamond and much more useful. Then he put it in his pocket, said goodbye again, and went out of the low door of the shelter. It was getting late in the autumn evening, and it was already dark and gloomy in the pit. Barney knew there was a way out right at the other end of the pit, and by going a long way round he could get back to the house. There were rustlings in dry leaves and muffled sounds from the middle of bramble patches, but somehow Barney found he didn't mind. He felt the hard stone in his pocket and thought of Stig in his den under the cliff. You weren't likely to find anything stranger than Stig wherever you looked. And well, Stig was his friend. When he got back to the house, his grandmother and his sister Lou were just coming in from feeding the hens. "Where have you been all the time?" asked his grandmother. "I went to the chalk pit," said Barney. "All by yourself?" exclaimed Lou. "Yes, of course." "What have you been doing?" his grandmother asked. "Well, I fell and bumped my head." "Poor old Barney," said Lou and laughed. "But it was all right," Barney went on, "because I met Stig." "Who's Stig?" they both asked together. "He's a sort of boy," replied Barney. "He just wears rabbit skins and lives in a cave. He gets his water through a vacuum cleaner and puts chalk in his bath. He's my friend." "Good gracious!" exclaimed his grandmother. "What funny friends you have, dear." "He means he's been playing cavemen," Lou explained helpfully. "Stig's just a pretend friend, isn't he, Barney?" "No, he's really true," Barney protested. "Of course he's true," his grandmother smiled. "Now, Lou, don't tease Barney." "Let's pretend Stig's a wicked wizard who lives in a cave and turns people into stone," Lou began earnestly. She was always inventing stories and games like that. "No," said Barney quietly, feeling the sharp flint in his pocket. "Stig's nice. He's my friend." That night he kept the flint under his pillow and thought of Stig out there in the pit, sleeping on his bed of bracken and old newspapers. He wished he lived all the time at Granny's house so that he could get to know Stig. He had to go back the day after tomorrow. Never mind, he'd visit Stig in the morning. Now, I'm going to record for 10 minutes, and I've got about 2.5 more minutes. So I think what I'm going to do is start chapter 2, which is called Digging with Stig. Before I do, I'm going to show you the picture from the front of chapter 2. Ooh, can you see it? It is, by the look of it, Grandmother, Barney and Lou having a meal together. So, chapter 2, Digging with Stig. It was a fine autumn morning and the grass was very wet with dew outside. Barney pushed his breakfast down as fast as he could manage. "What do you want to do today?" his grandmother asked as she drank her coffee. "I have to go into Sevenoaks this morning. Do you want to come?" Barney's heart sank. Go into Sevenoaks? Well, it was all right if he had nothing else to do, but he had to go and see Stig. "No, thank you, Granny," he said. "I don't think I want to go in Sevenoaks." "You'll be quite happy just messing about here?" asked his grandmother. "Yes, thank you. I just want to mess about with Stig." "Oh, I see," Granny smiled. "With your friend Stig. Well, Mrs. Pratt will be here all the morning, so if you like you can stay with her. And with Stig, of course." Lou said she would like to go into the town and she wasn't particularly interested in playing with Stig. Barney knew from the way she said it that she still thought Stig was a pretend friend. But that was all right. If she didn't want to meet Stig, she needn't. "Can I go out now?" he asked. "All right," said Granny. "Put your boots on," she called after him as he shot through the door. Barney's feet made dark prints in the dew as he headed across the lawn towards the chalk pit. Then he stopped and stood still in the middle of the lawn. Suppose he didn't find Stig after all? The sun was bright. Yellow leaves fluttered down from the elm trees onto the grass. A robin puffed its breast on a rose tree and squeaked at him. Barney suddenly wasn't sure that he believed in Stig himself. It wasn't a Stiggish day like yesterday when he had fallen down the pit. He had fallen, hadn't he? He felt the bump on the back of his head. Yes, that was real enough. He'd fallen and bumped his head. And then what? Funny things did happen when you bumped your head. Perhaps you only saw Stig's when you fell and bumped your head. He didn't think he wanted to fall over the cliff again on purpose and bump his head again. Was Stig a person you could just go and play with like the children at the end of the road at home? He had to find out, but he didn't want to go to the chalk pit and find nothing. He stood with his hands in his pockets in the middle of the lawn, his fingers playing with something hard in the left-hand pocket of his jeans. He remembered something and pulled out the thing he had in his hand. Of course, the flint! He looked at it glinting in the sunlight, like a black diamond with its chipped pattern. He'd seen Stig make it. There was no mistake about that. Of course Stig was real. Right, that's it for today. And tomorrow we'll continue with Chapter 2, Digging with Stig. So I'm going to say bye-bye now. Lots of love. Bye.